Tyen, a solitary Apache warrior in the later years of his life, had known more loss than most men could endure in a lifetime. His days of fighting alongside his tribe were long behind him, yet the memories of battle still clung to him like a shadow. Each scar on his body told a story of survival, courage, and sorrow. But the passing years had brought him more than physical wounds. They had left him emotionally hollow, withdrawn, and wary of the world beyond the rolling hills and rugged plains he now called home. The cabin he had purchased was old, with walls warped by time and weather, and a roof that had seen better days decades ago. To most it would have seemed uninviting, even cruel, yet for Tyen it was perfect. Its remoteness offered a promise of solitude, a sanctuary where he could fade from the world and its relentless encroachments. He imagined himself sitting by the fireplace, staring at the dying embers, reflecting on his life and eventually closing his eyes forever, unbothered by anyone or anything. This was not just a retreat. It was a farewell to life itself. He arrived at the cabin with only the essentials, a small satchel of provisions, a worn rifle, and the few belongings that tied him to the world. The journey to the cabin had been long and arduous, traversing narrow trails, crossing icy streams, and navigating dense forests. The land itself seemed to mirror his state of mind, harsh, unyielding, and solitary. As he stepped inside, the creaking wood beneath his boots echoed like an old friend acknowledging his arrival. Dust motes floated in the beams of light that pierced through the gaps in the walls, and the faint smell of damp wood filled the air. It was perfect in its imperfection. Tyen spent hours unpacking and arranging his sparse possessions. A small cot was set in the corner, a table and chair placed near the window, and a few old pots stacked in the tiny kitchen area. Each object had been chosen carefully, not for comfort but for practicality. He didn't need luxury. He needed nothing more than survival in its barest form. Yet as the days passed, Tyen felt the weight of the silence. It was not the quiet of peace but the heavy, suffocating silence of isolation. Memories of his tribe haunted him, faces of friends lost, warriors fallen, and children orphaned. He remembered the laughter that once filled the campfires and the songs that had accompanied countless nights under the stars. That life was gone, swallowed by the march of settlers and the relentless advance of civilization. Tyen had chosen exile not only to escape the world but to protect himself from the pain of remembering what he had lost. The wilderness outside offered little comfort. Wolves howled in the distance, streams gurgled over jagged stones, and the wind whispered through the pines like the voices of ancestors long gone. Tyen hunted and fished, his skills honed over decades. Yet even the thrill of a successful hunt failed to stir more than a fleeting sense of satisfaction. Each evening he returned to his cabin with a heavy heart, lighting the fire and staring at the flickering flames. In those quiet moments he confronted the truth. He was not just alone. He was empty. The walls of the cabin mirrored the walls he had built around his own heart. Despite the darkness, Tyen's mind often wandered to what could have been. He remembered love, fleeting and fragile, that had once touched his life. A woman whose smile had seemed to brighten the darkest of nights. Children who had laughed and played without a care, and the simple joy of companionship. These memories, however, were tinged with sorrow, for he had lost them all. He had buried his heart under the weight of grief, choosing solitude over the risk of loss. Night after night he listened to the wind, imagining the world as it had been when the Apache roamed freely, and as it had become under the relentless expansion of settlers. Each star in the sky reminded him of the vastness of life, and yet the emptiness inside him was even greater than the expanse of the universe. Tyen had come to the cabin to die, but death did not come easily, nor did it offer solace. Instead, it left him with time, a relentless, unyielding stretch of hours and days in which he was forced to reckon with the choices that had led him here. The cabin, once a symbol of refuge, now felt like a cage. Tyen's solitude had become both a shield and a prison. He feared the world, feared the intrusion of others, yet he also feared the absence of connection. He realized that he had been alive all these years but had truly lived very little. The Apache warrior had survived battles and disasters, but he had not survived himself. The weight of this realization pressed down upon him, heavier than any pack of supplies or rifle. As the outline of his life settled into the rhythm of the cabin, Tyen made one final walk through the surrounding forest. He observed the subtle signs of life, birds nesting, deer grazing, the wind moving the leaves. Despite his grief, a quiet sense of awe stirred within him. Nature, in its relentless continuity, reminded him that life persisted even after devastation. And yet, for all its beauty, Tien felt the ache of solitude more keenly than ever. He returned to the cabin with a new understanding. He had chosen this path to die alone, but perhaps the universe had other plans. Deep inside, buried beneath years of sorrow and resignation, there remained a spark of hope, a fragile glimmer that life could still surprise him. Tien did not yet know what form that surprise would take, but he felt, for the first time in decades, a subtle stirring of anticipation. By the end of the first outline, Tien's story sets the stage for the arrival of someone who could transform his solitude into connection. The reader is left with a sense of tension and possibility. A man who has resigned himself to die alone may yet discover that life, in all its unpredictable richness, has more to offer than he ever imagined. Tien's days in the cabin had settled into a rhythm of solitude. The wind through the trees, the distant calls of hawks, and the occasional howl of a wolf were his only companions. He had resigned himself to the idea that he was finished with the world, that life had nothing left to offer him. But fate, as it often does, has a way of intervening when least expected. It was on a particularly stormy evening in early autumn when the first knock came at his door. Tien, wary and instinctively on edge, gripped his rifle and approached. Outside, the wind whipped the trees into frantic motion, and the rain slashed against the cabin walls with an almost violent insistence. Through the storm he saw a figure, a woman soaked to the bone, clutching a small child to her chest. Their clothes were tattered, mud streaked across their boots and faces, and their eyes carried a mixture of fear and desperation. Tien's first instinct was to turn them away. He had retreated to this cabin to die alone, to shut himself off from the messiness of human lives. But something in the way the child clung to the woman, eyes wide and trembling, stirred a protective instinct he thought had long since died. The woman, noticing his hesitation, spoke, her voice shaky but firm. "Please, we mean no harm. The storm, it's too strong to travel. We just need shelter for the night." Tien's heart, long accustomed to silence, beat faster. He wanted to refuse, to return to the safety of solitude, but something inside him, a memory of gentler times, of laughter and warmth, made him pause. Slowly, with a deep, gruff voice, he said, "Come in quickly before you freeze to death." The woman stepped inside, holding the child close. Tien observed them carefully, noting the way the boy's small fingers clutched at his mother's shirt, how she shielded him from the wind and rain. He could see the exhaustion etched into their faces, the lines of worry carved by months, maybe years, of struggle. It was a stark contrast to the harsh independence he had cultivated in himself. For the first time in a long while, he felt needed. Clara, as the woman introduced herself, explained in halting words how they had been traveling from the east, seeking a new life after tragedy struck their homestead. Her husband had died suddenly, leaving her to navigate the wilderness alone with Benji, her small, spirited son. The roads were dangerous, the weather unpredictable, and she had nearly lost hope before spotting the cabin. Tien listened without interruption, studying her profile, the determination in her eyes, the resilience in her posture, the gentle, protective way she held her child. At first, Tien tried to keep his distance. He assigned them a corner of the cabin near the fireplace where they could dry their wet clothes and warm themselves. He busied himself with chopping wood and repairing the leaky roof, maintaining an air of gruff detachment. Yet he found his eyes drawn to Clara and Benji more often than he intended. The boy's curiosity, the way he peeked at Tien with wide eyes as if the man were a creature of some mysterious power, tugged at something deep within him. The storm raged for hours, and as the fire crackled, Clara cooked a simple meal of cornmeal and dried meat. Tien sat across from them, silent, observing the small domestic ritual. The warmth of the fire and the shared act of eating created a sense of intimacy he had not felt in decades. For the first time in years, he did not feel entirely alone. As night fell, the wind outside howled like a living thing, rattling the cabin walls and sending shivers down Tien's spine. He made sure Clara and Benji were tucked in, covering them with the thin blankets he had. He lingered near the doorway, his shadow stretching across the wooden floor, unsure whether to leave or stay. There was a pull in his chest, a stirring of emotions long suppressed, compassion, curiosity, and a flicker of longing. During the long night, Tyann found himself watching over them. Benji's soft breathing reminded him of the children he had once known in his tribe, the laughter that used to echo across campfires, memories of mothers and families of care and connection, flooded him unexpectedly. He realized that in his quest to die alone, he had not anticipated this. He had not imagined that someone might simply walk into his life and shift the balance of his world. Morning brought clarity. Clara, waking first, tended the small fire while Tyann went outside to assess the damage the storm had caused. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, and the forest seemed alive with renewed vigor after the tempest. Tyann noticed Clara's quiet efficiency, her ability to manage the cabin, and the way Benji helped her with small tasks, eager to be useful. There was dignity in their survival, a resilience that resonated with the warrior in him. Tyann realized that allowing them to stay was not merely an act of kindness. It was the first time in years he had opened his cabin, and perhaps his heart, to others. The presence of Clara and Benji forced him to reconsider everything he had believed about solitude. He began to see the potential for a different kind of life, one where he could protect, nurture, and belong again. Yet Tyann remained cautious. His trust was earned slowly, brick by brick. He observed how Clara managed the cabin, how she responded to challenges, and how Benji looked up to him with admiration and hope. Each small interaction was a test of boundaries, a dance of respect and wariness. He found himself smiling at the boy's innocent questions, lending small answers that revealed a side of him long hidden. By the end of the second day, a fragile rhythm had begun to form. Tyann shared stories of the land, teaching Benji how to identify edible plants and track animals, while Clara worked beside him in the cabin, preparing meals and tending to the fire. The storm outside had passed, leaving behind the crisp clarity of autumn air. But the storm within Tyann, the fear of intimacy, the hesitation to care, was only beginning to settle. For the first time, Tyann realized that solitude was not the only way to live, and perhaps it had never truly been what he wanted. Clara and Benji's arrival was not a disruption but a chance, a second chance at connection, at family, at life itself. And though he did not yet admit it, a small spark of something more flickered within him, a possibility of love, not born of passion alone but of companionship, trust, and shared experience. The unexpected arrival of Clara and Benji had begun to unravel the walls Tyann had spent decades building around his heart. Their presence challenged him to remember who he was, not just as a warrior but as a man capable of tenderness and loyalty. The cabin, once a tomb of solitude, had started to feel like the beginnings of a home. And with that realization came the first glimmer of hope, a quiet understanding that life, even for a broken warrior, could still surprise him in the most extraordinary ways. The days that followed Clara and Benji's arrival marked a subtle but profound shift in Tyann's life. The warrior who had come to the cabin to die alone now found himself entangled in the rhythms of another's survival. At first, he approached every task with the same detached precision he had honed over decades, chopping firewood, repairing the roof, fetching water from the nearby stream. Yet the presence of Clara and her son transformed each chore into a shared enterprise, an unspoken collaboration that awakened emotions Tyann had long buried. Clara's energy and determination were unrelenting. Despite the storm-soaked clothing and mud-caked boots, she moved with purposeful grace, tending to the cabin and ensuring that Benji was warm, fed, and safe. Tyann observed her quietly at first, noting the subtle ease with which she managed tasks that had once seemed impossible to him. He recognized in her a strength akin to that of the Apache women of his youth, a resilience born not of training, but of necessity. Benji, small and curious, shadowed his mother's every move, his bright eyes reflecting admiration and trust. It did not take long for Tyann to realize that survival was no longer a solitary endeavor. Each day, as they worked together, they faced the challenges of the wilderness, gathering firewood in the forest, hunting game to supplement their meager supplies, fortifying the cabin against wind and rain, and repairing the roof that had been weakened by the autumn storm. Tyann found himself instructing Benji on the subtleties of tracking deer, identifying edible plants, and maintaining their limited provisions. The boy absorbed every lesson with enthusiasm, occasionally offering questions or observations that drew Tyann into conversation. Through these daily hardships, the warrior's emotional walls began to crack. The cabin, once a tomb of solitude, now vibrated with the rhythms of life and care. Tyen discovered that he had forgotten how much joy could be derived from small victories. The success of a well-aimed arrow, the warmth of a fire after a long day in the cold, the laughter of a child who had learned something new. Clara, too, started noticing the subtler sides of Tyen. His dry sense of humor, the patience with which he taught Benji, the pride he took in small accomplishments. Each interaction chipped away at the fear and mistrust that had defined him for so long. Yet healing was not instantaneous. Tyen wrestled with memories that threatened to overshadow these new connections. At night, when the fire had burned down to embers and the cabin was quiet, he sometimes found himself staring into the shadows, recalling faces of those he had lost, tribe members, friends, and loved ones. Guilt, sorrow, and regret mingled with the warmth of the home he was beginning to build. It was during these quiet moments that he confronted the most difficult truth. He had isolated himself not merely to avoid others, but to avoid the pain of remembering and the possibility of loss. Clara, perceptive and compassionate, began to sense the depth of his internal struggle. She never pressed him to speak but allowed her presence to be a gentle anchor. Tyen began to notice her small gestures, how she made sure Benji's shoes were dry, how she left a place for him by the fire, how she smiled at him with an openness that invited trust without demanding it. Slowly, imperceptibly, Tyen's defenses began to lower. Their bond deepened not through grand declarations but through shared necessity. Tyen noticed the way Clara would instinctively place herself between Benji and danger, how her eyes softened when the boy laughed or stumbled, how she carried the weight of responsibility without complaint. Her resilience mirrored his own, and in that he found both admiration and a nascent respect that bordered on affection. Meanwhile, Benji became an unexpected bridge between them. His curiosity, innocence, and eagerness to please drew Tyen out of his solitude. The boy's laughter, once foreign to the cabin, became a constant companion, breaking the oppressive silence that had defined Tyen's existence. Teaching him, guiding him, and sometimes correcting him, Tyen rediscovered a capacity for patience and care he had thought lost. Every small success in the boy's learning was a balm for his weary soul, a reminder that life could still hold purpose and joy. Hardship continued to shape their days. One afternoon, while gathering firewood along the edge of the forest, Tyen spotted a bear nearby. He motioned for Clara to retreat into the safety of the cabin while he quietly stalked the creature, ensuring it would not threaten them. The tension of those moments, the need for vigilance, the skill required to navigate danger brought clarity. Tyen realized that his protective instincts had never truly diminished. They had merely been dormant. That instinct, combined with Clara's trust in him, forged a bond deeper than friendship. Even mundane tasks became moments of connection. Tyen and Clara cooked meals together, repaired broken furniture, and organized their small space. They laughed at mistakes, shared stories of past lives, and discovered subtle commonalities: a love of the wilderness, a reverence for quiet moments, and a deep-seated understanding of hardship and resilience. These ordinary, everyday experiences became extraordinary in the way they healed, nurtured, and connected them. Gradually, Tyen recognized that his perception of solitude had been incomplete. He had believed isolation would protect him from pain, but in reality, it had prevented him from experiencing love, hope, and the quiet joys of companionship. Clara and Benji, through no deliberate design, had begun to restore these elements to his life. Their presence reminded him that survival alone was not enough, that life's true value lay in shared experiences, in nurturing bonds, and in the small but profound acts of care. As the weeks passed, subtle romantic tension began to surface. Tyen caught himself watching Clara when she thought he was not looking, noticing the warmth in her smile, the way she moved through the cabin with confident grace, and the quiet strength that guided both herself and her son. Clara, in turn, recognized Tyen's steadfastness, his courage, and his underlying tenderness, a side of him that had been hidden beneath years of grief and solitude. Neither spoke of love outright, yet the moments they shared, repairing a broken roof together, gathering berries along the stream, or simply sitting by the fire, carried the weight of unspoken connection. By the end of this period of shared hardship, the cabin had transformed in ways beyond its physical repair. It was no longer merely a refuge for a dying man. It had become a home, a space where trust, care, and tentative affection could grow. Tyen, once resigned to an existence of quiet despair, began to hope. The healing power of shared labor, responsibility, and mutual respect had awakened something dormant in him. The realization that life, even after great loss, could be rich, meaningful, and capable of love. The chapter of hardship concluded not with a dramatic declaration, but with a quiet, profound understanding. Tyan and Clara had navigated the challenges of wilderness life together, forging a connection stronger than either had expected. Benji, the catalyst of much of this transformation, had become the living embodiment of their new family. Tyan's heart, long hardened by grief and solitude, had begun to thaw, and though neither fully admitted it yet, a foundation of love, trust, and hope had been laid, one that would carry them through the trials to come. The forest around the cabin, usually a source of quiet comfort, became the stage for a sudden and dangerous test of the fragile bonds Tyan had begun to form with Clara and Benji. A scorching summer wildfire, driven by strong winds and dry underbrush, swept unexpectedly through the region. The smoke curled into the sky in thick, dark tendrils, and the air was heavy with the acrid smell of burning pine. Tyan spotted the first signs while hunting for game along the ridge. A distant glow, orange and flickering, and the faint crackle of fire. His warrior instinct surged. "Clara!" he called, his voice urgent but calm, hiding the fear he knew he could not afford to show. She turned from gathering herbs with Benji in tow. Her eyes widened as she noticed the smoke, and immediately she grasped the severity of the situation. Tyan's mind raced. In that instant, the possibility of losing them, the family he had come to protect and care for, overwhelmed him. He had lived a lifetime of danger, yet this threat was different. It was not faceless enemies or distant battles. It was a danger that could destroy the fragile life they were building together. And more importantly, it could take from him the people he had begun to love. The wildfire roared closer, consuming everything in its path. Tyan's protective instincts took full command. He barked instructions. "Clara, gather water from the creek. Benji, help her with the buckets. Stay low!" The hours that followed were a blur of exertion, fear, and sheer willpower. Tyan fought the fire with whatever means were available, digging fire breaks, throwing dirt on embers, and directing Clara to douse the smaller flames. Sweat ran in rivulets down his back, mixing with the soot and ash that coated his clothes and skin. Clara worked tirelessly, her determination unwavering, though exhaustion threatened to topple her. Benji, young but courageous, followed Tyan's commands, passing buckets and moving as swiftly as his small legs could carry him. In the chaos, there was no room for hesitation or doubt. Tyan's mind, often reserved and cautious, focused entirely on survival. Every decision carried weight. Every misstep could be fatal. And yet, even amidst the fire and smoke, he found moments that pierced through the terror. Clara's hand brushing against his as they passed buckets, the fleeting touch of reassurance. Benji's small hand gripping his when he guided him through the thickening smoke. These moments, though brief, reminded Tyan of what was at stake, not just life but love. As the fire crept closer to the cabin, Tyan made a split-second decision. He would lead Clara and Benji through a back trail to safety, a path he had scouted long ago but never expected to use in desperation. The terrain was rugged, strewn with fallen branches and jagged rocks, and the smoke choked their lungs. Tyan held Benji's hand firmly while keeping Clara close, guiding them through the wilderness with an intensity born of fear and love. During a particularly treacherous section, Benji slipped on loose gravel and tumbled down a small slope. Tyan reacted instantly, catching him before he could fall into a ravine. Clara gasped, and for a moment the fear and adrenaline suspended time. Tyan looked into her eyes, seeing not only fear but relief, gratitude, and something deeper: trust. In that instant he realized the depth of his feelings. He had long thought love was a luxury, something dangerous and fleeting. Now, as he held Benji safely and saw Clara's unspoken emotions reflected in her eyes, he understood that love was worth risking everything. After what felt like hours but was likely only moments, they reached a clearing where the fire could not reach. Tyan, Clara, and Benji collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, covered in soot and sweat but alive. The wildfire continued to rage behind them, a reminder of nature's power and unpredictability. Yet here in the clearing, a sense of triumph and connection prevailed. They had survived together. In the quiet that followed the immediate danger, Emotions spilled over. Tan, who had long kept his heart guarded, finally allowed himself to speak. He confessed to Clara, voice roughened by smoke and exertion, I thought I came here to die alone. But I can't, not anymore. I can't imagine facing the world without you. Or him. His gaze fell on Benji, whose wide eyes reflected understanding beyond his years. You two, you're my family now. Clara, exhausted but resolute, responded with a trembling voice. I never imagined I'd find safety or love in a place so remote, but you've shown me courage, kindness, and something I didn't think I'd ever have again. I trust you, Tyan, completely. The unspoken words hung in the air, words of love, commitment, and a shared understanding forged in danger and survival. That night, after the fire had subsided into distant embers and the sky cleared, Tyan built a fire for warmth and reflection. Clara and Benji sat close, their presence comforting and grounding. In the flickering light, Tyan allowed himself to feel without restraint. Grief for what had been lost, gratitude for what remained, and a profound, tender love that he had not thought possible. He realized that the hardships they had endured together had not only tested their bond but had revealed it in its most honest and resilient form. The wildfire became a turning point. It was both literal and symbolic, a cleansing, terrifying force that forced Tyan to confront his deepest fears and acknowledge his feelings. The challenges had stripped away pretense, exposing raw emotions, fear, trust, courage, and love. Through danger, they had discovered the strength of their connection, the depth of their trust, and the possibility of a life together, built not just on survival, but on genuine partnership and love. By the end of this trial, Tyan and Clara were no longer simply coexisting under the same roof. They were a family forged in fire, bonded by shared danger and mutual reliance. The warrior who had come to the cabin to die alone now understood the power of love tested and revealed. Their bond was not based on fleeting attraction or convenience, but on the enduring courage to face adversity together, to protect each other at any cost, and to allow vulnerability to coexist with strength. In the quiet aftermath, as stars emerged in the clear night sky and the distant smell of smoke lingered in the air, Tyan allowed himself a moment of reflection. The man who had once chosen solitude above all else now embraced the possibility of love and family. He held Clara close, feeling her heartbeat against his chest, and Benji nestled nearby, a living reminder of hope and renewal. In that moment, Tyan understood that love, once fully revealed through trial, was a force strong enough to transform a life, even that of a warrior who had thought himself destined to die alone. The days following the wildfire brought a calm that felt almost sacred. The cabin, though scarred from the flames, stood resilient among the charred trees and smoky air, a testament to survival and the determination of those who had fought to protect it. For Tyan, Clara, and Benji, the world outside seemed quieter, softer somehow, as if nature itself had acknowledged the trials they had endured and granted them reprieve. It was in this calm that a new chapter began, a chapter not of survival alone, but of life, love, and family. The cabin, once a symbol of Tyan's intended solitude and imminent death, had transformed into a home. Clara took to organizing the small space with care, arranging the limited furniture, hanging simple curtains to keep out the chill, and creating a warm hearth that radiated not only heat, but comfort. Tyan, accustomed to utilitarian survival, observed with a mixture of pride and awe as the cabin gradually became a place that invited joy, rather than only shelter. Even Benji, young and playful, had a small corner with toys fashioned from sticks, stones, and scraps, a testament to the newfound life thriving in their midst. Morning routines became rituals of connection. Tyan rose early, often before the sun, to check traps for game, gather water, and ensure the cabin was secure. Clara followed with her chores, tending to food preparation, mending clothes, and gathering herbs. Benji would wake to join them, eager to help, to learn, and to be part of this small but vibrant family. Tyan began to notice the little details that once would have gone unobserved. The way Clara hummed softly while she worked, the sparkle of sunlight on her hair, the way Benji laughed at the smallest joys. These details, simple and ordinary, now held profound meaning for him. The warrior, once resigned to the finality of solitude, discovered a rhythm in daily life that was both grounding and uplifting. Hunting trips were no longer solitary ventures. They became shared experiences. Clara sometimes accompanied him to gather wild plants or berries, her laughter echoing through the trees, a sound so unfamiliar yet intoxicating in its warmth. Tayan taught Benji tracking and survival skills, each lesson a bridge connecting him to the boy in a way that nurtured both pride and love. These shared moments solidified bonds that had been tested by hardship and danger, now reinforced by daily companionship. As the weeks turned into months, the seasons shifted. Autumn's gold gave way to winter's quiet hush, snow blanketing the land in pristine white. The challenges of winter brought them closer still. Tayan built a more substantial firewood stockpile, taught Benji how to cut and split wood safely, and guided Clara in insulating the cabin against the cold. Nights were spent gathered around the fire, sharing stories of the past. Tayan spoke of his youth among his tribe, the battles he had fought, and the loved ones he had lost. Clara, in turn, shared memories of her late husband, her childhood, and the dreams she still hoped to realize. In these conversations, their hearts intertwined further, bonded by empathy, understanding, and the shared joys and sorrows of life. Love, once a cautious flicker, now blossomed steadily. Tayan no longer feared vulnerability, for he had come to understand that true strength lies not in isolation but in connection. Clara's presence had awakened a capacity for tenderness that Tayan had thought lost forever. He found himself thinking of her not just as a companion but as a partner, someone whose life was inseparable from his own. Their touches, brief, deliberate, and gentle, spoke volumes. A hand placed on her shoulder while helping with chores, a shared smile across the fire, a lingering look of understanding in moments of silence. These gestures carried a depth of affection that words alone could not convey. Benji, their young link to hope and the future, thrived in this new life. His laughter became a soundtrack to the cabin, a constant reminder that the family they were building was real and enduring. Tayan felt an unfamiliar but exhilarating sense of responsibility and joy. He was no longer a man preparing to die alone. He was a protector, a teacher, and a father figure. Each day spent with Benji and Clara deepened his understanding of life's richness and the extraordinary potential of love. The natural world, once a backdrop to Tayan's solitary existence, became a shared wonder. Mornings brought crisp air and the songs of birds. Afternoons offered long walks along the stream, the exploration of hidden valleys and the quiet observation of deer and other wildlife. Nights were spent under starlit skies where Tayan would recount stories of Apache legends and Clara would weave her own tales, creating a shared mythology that bound them together. These moments of wonder and reflection were as much a part of their home as the cabin itself, cementing their bond and teaching them the beauty of presence, connection, and gratitude. Through the seasons, they also began small symbolic gestures of permanence and belonging. Tayan repaired and reinforced the cabin with Clara's help, building shelves, securing the roof, and constructing a small garden outside. They planted seeds together, vegetables, herbs, and flowers, a living testament to their commitment to life and each other. These tangible acts mirrored the emotional growth happening within them. Each seed planted, nurtured, and grown became a metaphor for their love. Fragile at first, yet resilient, capable of thriving even amidst challenges. The culmination of their journey came in the quiet moments of domestic life. Shared meals, storytelling, and the simple joys of touch, laughter, and companionship. Tayan, once burdened by grief and solitude, had come to cherish these ordinary acts as extraordinary blessings. Clara, who had once feared loneliness and loss, found security and warmth in Tayan's steadfast presence. And Benji, whose journey had begun with fear and uncertainty, now thrived in a household filled with love, trust, and stability. On a crisp winter evening, as snow fell gently around the cabin and the fire crackled warmly within, Tayan held Clara close, feeling the steady rhythm of her heart. Benji slept nearby, wrapped in blankets and dreaming peacefully. In that serene, quiet moment, Tayan understood the profound transformation that had occurred. He had arrived at the cabin intending to end his life in isolation, yet he now lived fully, with purpose, love, and connection. The cabin, once a symbol of death and solitude, had become a home, a sanctuary, and a place of renewal. Tayan's life had been irrevocably changed. Love, tested and revealed through hardship, had not only survived but flourished. The family he had come to protect became the very reason he now wanted to live. The warrior who had prepared for death now embraced life, guided by love, trust, and the unbreakable bonds forged in fire, struggle, and shared joy. The story of Tayen, Clara, and Benji became a testament to the resilience of the human heart, the transformative power of connection, and the enduring possibility of finding love, even when it seems impossible. The final image of the story is one of quiet triumph. Tayen, standing outside the cabin at dawn, watching the first light of day filter through the trees with Clara and Benji by his side. Their hands brushed together in a simple, intimate gesture, a promise of enduring love. The land around them, once harsh and unyielding, now feels like a canvas for their shared life. And in that moment, the lonely Apache warrior who once sought only death now embraces a future rich with hope, family, and love, a life reborn in the most extraordinary and unexpected way.